The Missouri Coalition for the Environment is calling for immediate air quality tests in North St. Louis County in neighborhoods surrounding an underground fire at the Bridgeton Sanitary Landfill.
The coalition's executive director, Kat Logan-Smith, says residents in North St. Louis County have a right to know what they're breathing.
Pets are sick, people are sick, and the air stinks, which suggests that there is something in the air. And the agencies in charge, the EPA, the Department of Natural Resources, Air Pollution Control, they need to be finding out what's in the air and how much is in the air.
Logan-Smith says the fire also deserves air quality monitoring because that landfill is adjacent to a nuclear dump site containing material from the Manhattan Project. Kevin Killeen, News Radio 1120, KMOX.
Updating a story we've been following for you on KMOX, the St. Louis County Health Department is now urging the state to test the air to find out if residents near the Bridgeton Sanitary Landfill fire are breathing unhealthy air.
The Missouri Department of Natural Resources wants to let the landfill owner hire a consultant to test the air, but St. Louis County Health Director Dr. Dolores Gunn says that's not good enough.
We need to see evidence from a viable entity with no other interest, an unbiased entity that can give us some valid data of what is actually coming out of that, the odors that are coming or emitting off of that particular landfill.
Dr. Gunn has also contacted the EPA and already received a commitment from them to check the air for possible radiation from the nuclear waste West Lake landfill, which is next to the landfill that's burning. Kevin Killeen, News Radio 1120, KMOX.
An environmental group says it still has serious questions about an underground landfill fire in Bridgeton that some say is giving them headaches, even though the state says air tests show no danger.
The Missouri Department of Natural Resources says its air monitoring for the week of February 4th around the Bridgeton Sanitary Landfill shows gas concentrations do not exceed a level of concern for public health. But Kat Logan-Smith with the Coalition for the Environment says the week it was tested was not ideal.
Very windy. It had rained and snowed for 3 days of that week, and so the air was a lot cleaner. You know, people breathe every day. They don't just breathe for 1 week in February.
The group is now requesting through the state's open records law all of the documents related to what standards were used to call the landfill fumes safe. Kevin Killeen, News Radio 1120, KMOX.
The term dirty bomb came up during a meeting this morning to update community members on the potential threat posed by an underground landfill fire in North County.
Protect the state of Missouri from a regional disaster.
This is Brett Bloom. Washington University experts who conducted a new study on the dangers of the landfill fire discussed their findings during a public forum in Bridgeton. Dr. Bob Chris, director of the Stable Isotope Lab at WashU, said one of the biggest problems about the entire situation is that Republic Services didn't keep a detailed study of exactly what's buried in the landfill.
Somebody knows this should not be some mystifying secret. People have a right to know.
But when another expert suggested that there was a potential for a dirty bomb-like explosion at the site that could spread radioactive waste, the local president for Republic Services cried foul, saying opponents were now resorting to wild speculation and scare tactics to spread misinformation. Brett Bloom, News Radio 1120, KMOX.
The state of Missouri files suit against the owner of a Bridgeton landfill where an underground fire has neighbors feeling sick.
It basically has the smell of burning plastic or burning hair.
Attorney General Chris Koster says it's time for aggressive action to get the fire under control at the Bridgeton Sanitary Landfill.
From 2010 until 2012, the fire seemed to be contained and was expanding at about 2 feet per month, not that much. It took a relatively dramatic step forward in January and started expanding at about 25 feet per month.
Koster says he's also concerned about tanker trucks loaded with sludge from the site, which he says the Metropolitan Sewer District stopped taking several months back. Kevin Killeen, News Radio 1120, KMOX.
More questions this morning about whether the underground fire at a Bridgeton landfill could affect nearby radioactive waste.
The Missouri Coalition for the Environment is warning the fire at the Bridgeton Sanitary Landfill could soon reach groundwater monitoring wells around the edge of the West Lake landfill. Ed Smith with the coalition.
It's been shown that there's radioactive materials in this one well, and based on the DNR map, it looks to be near the bottleneck where elevated temperatures are being found.
Smith says his group is getting the runaround from EPA and DNR, neither agency answering his questions, he says, about whether the fire could reach the contaminated wells and what that would mean for nearby residents. Kevin Killeen, News Radio 1120, KMOX.
Some Bridgeton residents aren't impressed with the offer of a temporary hotel room to get away from the smell of a burning garbage dump. KMOX's Kevin Killeen reports.
Peggy Dill on Tortosa Drive says the offer of a hotel room with a kitchenette between May 20th and June 14th, when the smell is supposed to get bad, doesn't interest her yet.
That's going to really be a huge inconvenience as far as cooking meals, doing laundry, getting to our daily activities. This is where home is.
And neighbor Larry Curl is worried about burglars.
If everybody goes out, the Bridgeton police don't have enough to patrol up here.
The relocation offer comes ahead of next week's court hearing in a lawsuit filed by Attorney General Chris Koster. We'll find out then what Koster wants the landfill owners to do to satisfy the suffering homeowners. Kevin Killeen, News Radio 1120, KMOX.
Missouri's Attorney General announces a court-approved plan to put out the fire and end the smell coming from a Bridgeton garbage landfill. KMOX's Kevin Killeen reports.
Attorney General Chris Koster says he has reached a preliminary agreement with Republic Services, Inc., owners of the Bridgeton Sanitary Landfill, to smother that fire that's been smoldering underground for 2.5 years.
Republic has begun plans to place a new permanent cap over the site.
That cap consists of a heavy plastic tarp that would be stretched over the burning portion of the landfill, but first 6 concrete pipes feeding oxygen to the blaze have to be removed. Koster says the state will do real-time air monitoring for dangerous toxins, and residents within a 1-mile radius are being offered hotel rooms during the work from May 20th through June 14th. Kevin Killeen, News Radio 1120, KMOX.
The stench is now the least of their worries in Bridgeton.
That smelly landfill fire, according to Ed Smith with the Missouri Coalition for the Environment, has jumped over a barrier meant to kill it and is creeping toward nuclear waste.
There's temperature monitoring probes on the north side of what was supposed to stop the landfill fire, and we're seeing temperatures in those probes between 150 and 170 degrees. A normal landfill should be at around 130 degrees.
He says it's moved 200 feet in the last 3 months and is now just 1,000 feet from the radioactive dump. Resident Dawn Chapman.
Take a deep breath right now. Can you smell that? Guess what? This is not within their mile radius, is it?
She wants Republic Services relieved of responsibility for the landfill. A spokesman for Republic says, quote, the reaction is being contained within the south quarry of the landfill, end quote. Michael Calhoun, News Radio 1120, KMOX.
Nuns against nuclear waste. A busload of nuns stops to pray by a nuclear waste site in Bridgeton.
Good and gracious God,
This is Kevin Killeen. About 60 nuns with the Franciscan Sisters of St. Mary in Bridgeton stopped by the West Lake landfill to pray for the removal of radioactive waste buried there from the Manhattan Project. Sister Jean Dare.
This is something that we need to give our attention to, and we need to stand with the people that are really affected by this and who don't seem to be getting very many good answers to their concerns.
The nuns want the Army Corps of Engineers to remove the nuclear waste and put it in a federally approved site away from populated areas. Kevin Killeen, News Radio 1120, KMOX.
The fire department that would be sent in first if the underground Bridgeton landfill fire reaches the surface is planning for possible worst-case scenarios. KMOX's Kevin Killeen reports.
This is something that has cost me a lot of sleep.
Pattonville Fire Protection District Assistant Chief Matt Levanchi says he worries about if the fire were ever to reach the nuclear waste.
The possibility of radioactive isotopes leaching onto smoke particles and being carried in any direction the wind blows at that point.
Levanchi is pushing for a firebreak trench to be dug as soon as possible to prevent that. In the long run, though, he says the region needs to get the nuclear waste removed because he says underground landfill fires are common, and a new one could pop up in the future closer to the radioactive waste. Kevin Killeen, News Radio 1120, KMOX.
An environmental group is warning a new underground fire could be forming at a Bridgeton landfill much closer to buried nuclear waste than the current fire.
I think it changes things in a very significant way. I was already uncomfortable with this whole concept of luxury of time.
Ed Smith with the Missouri Coalition for the Environment is worried about the 143-degree temperature measured in a Bridgeton landfill gas well, which he says is only about 600 feet away from radioactive waste.
Right now is the perfect time for folks around the landfill to call the Department of Natural Resources and the Attorney General and say, what the hell are you guys doing about this increased temperature in the North Quarry, and how am I going to be protected?
Republic Services spokesman Richard Callow says the well in question is really about 1,000 feet away from the radioactive waste. Callow says there's not a chance of an underground fire reaching the nuclear material, and he calls the environmentalist group's concerns alarmist. Kevin Killeen, News Radio 1120, KMOX.
Plans for a firebreak trench at the burning Bridgeton landfill are on hold for now because of the federal government shutdown.
The EPA announcing that soil tests for radiation that were planned for this week ahead of any actual digging will have to be put off indefinitely because of the partial government shutdown. Neighborhood activist Dawn Chapman not happy.
I'm a little stunned, and I'm really worried. You've got a time-critical thing that needs to happen.
The Missouri Coalition for the Environment says it welcomes this timeout because of concerns that the landfill site was going to be cleared of vegetation with a brush hog possibly stirring up contaminated dust. Kevin Killeen, News Radio 1120, KMOX.
A nuclear waste expert is calling for the complete removal of nuclear material dumped at the Westlake landfill. KMOX's Kevin Killeen reports.
The stuff buried there at the Westlake landfill near the garbage dump with the underground fire is thorium-230, said to be 60,000 times more radioactive than uranium.
And it stays around for a very, very long time. Once it gets inside the human body, it stays there practically forever.
Robert Alvarez, who worked for the Department of Energy in the Clinton administration, says the EPA is broke and ineffective. He says it's time to put the Army Corps of Engineers in charge of digging the stuff up and hauling it away.
It can be done safely, and it can be done. The question is, what will be the cost, and who will pay for it?
Kevin Killeen, News Radio 1120, KMOX.
Soil samples where they planned to dig a firebreak trench near a burning landfill in Bridgeton turn up a surprise: deeply buried radioactive debris.
EPA Regional Administrator Carl Brooks says survey crews found the radioactive debris 30 feet down.
The radioactive material is probably mixed together under the ground with lots of different types of debris, household waste and construction debris.
Brooks couldn't give any numbers on how radioactive the new waste is, but he claims
people who live and work in that neighborhood are not at risk.
Plans call for a new round of digging tests with heavier equipment to find out what's down there before they dig the firebreak trench. Kevin Killeen, News Radio 1120, KMOX.